Thank you for joining us today, Professor Suranga Nanayakkara from Augmented Human Lab. So, why don't you tell us a bit about yourself and the lab for our viewers?
Hi, thanks for inviting me for this session. My name is Suranga. I'll start off with a bit of my journey. I started obviously the school education in Sri Lanka, and then I moved to Singapore for my bachelor's degree and continued to do my PhD in Singapore. And then during that time, I spent about half a year, one semester in University of Birmingham in UK as a undergraduate student exchange program. And then during the graduate studies, I spent about 6 months in University of Southern California as a graduate student visitor. And once my PhD was done, I spent some time at MIT Media Lab in Boston. And then finally, I moved back to Singapore as an assistant professor. And about a year ago, I moved my lab to University of Auckland in New Zealand. That's a bit of the journey and a bit of what I do. My lab is focused on creating interfaces that feels like an extension to our body, mind, behavior. Basically, we are thinking of how can we design systems that enhances our sensorial and cognitive capabilities. I can give you a couple of examples. Over the years, we have done an interface which is a little camera worn on your index finger. We call that finger reader. With that, a person can simply point at something and the camera sees what you're pointing at, and our computer vision backend recognizes, and the information that's interpreted gets spoken back to you. So with this, a blind person can simply walk into a store and point their finger at a product and get information like what is the flavor of the product, what is the price of the product, things like that. So that's one example of what we do at Augmented Human Lab, and there are many more examples. If you go to my website www.ahlab.org, you can see pretty much all the projects that has been up on the public. Yeah, that's a bit about myself and what we do.
This successful is not that easy. So, for viewers, why don't you tell about successful person?
It's hard to come up with few things or rather set of rules, but I can give few general advices, at least in my journey, things that helped me to get where I am now. One of them is the fact that I took some calculated risks. So for example, deciding to move from Sri Lanka to Singapore for my bachelor's degree when I had an offer to go to University of Morocco, which is probably the place that most of the science stream, rather the students who take A-level math stream wants to go. So when I had an offer from that place, which is about 10 minutes from where I live, my home, let go that and move to Singapore without a confirmed scholarship. That was a risk. Everything worked out later on. I managed to figure it out, got a scholarship, so that was all good. So that little calculated risk was one of the things. The second thing would be this idea of not being intimidated by things. For example, as soon as I moved to Singapore, the language was a barrier, the technology was a barrier. A specific example would be my first practical exam, where we had to write a code within a given time, and I figured out the algorithm, but then by the time I figured out the keys and then type one at a time, time ran out, the system shut down, and I didn't make it. So rather than being intimidated by those things, what I figured was probably this human computer interface, which is the way that you input characters to computer by typing, wasn't designed properly. I was having this question, why did I have to learn something completely alien? Why not the technology learned myself and adapted to me? So rather than being intimidated by these challenges, I thought there's opportunity to design things or redesign the technology so that these things can be overcome. That's the second thing. Seeing challenges as opportunities. And the third thing is, which I think probably the most important part, is the fact that when I wanted to do something, I didn't lose the gas. So what I mean by that is I kept doing things over a long period of time. If you want to make a real big impact, trying things for a day, for a week, or a month is not sufficient. You need to have that bigger goal, and break it down to small pieces, and do those small pieces over and over and over again without, the common mistake is we start doing stuff and then keep changing, and then you don't create enough critical mass to make an impact. So to summarize, I guess there's many things that helped me to get where I am now. But the three things that I would highlight would be the take the risk, and then see your challenges as opportunities, and then thirdly the perseverance, or the discipline of doing something over a long period of time. So these are the three things I would take away.
Okay, so having done many things and having a lot of experience, how do you think that Sri Lankans can help Sri Lanka become a better country?
Not sure if I am the right person to answer this question. Just in terms of personal contributions, I think one thing we all could do is really focus on our responsibilities, as opposed to just looking for our rights always. And the other thing is, we do have certain, whether you are a schoolboy or you are a working professional, we do have certain skill set, certain capabilities, certain resources with us. With that, we may be able to even solve a small problem. So my suggestion is, at least as a starting point, when you see an opportunity to make a difference for yourself or someone else, a tiny problem, do try to solve that. So if we all became a bit of socially responsible, as well as looking for opportunities to solve, doesn't matter the size, small problems, then I think collectively the place will be a better place. That's I think there are, as I said, there are many other factors, but I'm just talking about individually what we could do as good citizens.
Okay, so then again, having many experiences in the field and also in the field of education, what are your advices for school students to become successful in their lives?
So what I said in the earlier still applies, but specifically for school students and even for undergraduates, it's quite simple. I guess the focus should be on learning. I mean, at the school level, at the undergraduate level, the focus has to be 100% on learning, acquiring knowledge, broadening your horizons, and really spend time investigating, discovering, and creating this set of tools that will help you to get where you want to be. And that's hands down, that's it. That should be the focus.
Okay, so going beyond from school students, what are your advices for undergraduates who are currently in universities of Sri Lanka?
As I told you, it's the same, I guess, undergraduate and school about the same. It's about knowledge and pretty much the same answer as before. Focus on knowledge, acquire as much as possible, have open mind, look for opportunities to broaden your horizon.
Then maybe the people who are like still starting in your field, the like new early stage researchers, what are your advices for them?
You can advise many things. Again, you could be different field, right? Doesn't have to be engineering, could be some other field. The generalized thing I would suggest is, we need to think beyond Sri Lanka. So when you do your graduate studies, whether it's a master's or PhD, try and do the highest quality work. Don't benchmark yourself with your colleague or your fellow student from the same faculty or from another university within the country. Look look for the Try and look who is the best in the world that does similar research. Try and do work that's on par, comparable with those places. That's the way to really get the investment out of your time. So benchmark with the best, and then try and produce work that's comparable with them.
So, apart from research, do you have any advices for the graduates who are currently working in the industries? What can you say to them?
I would think it's the same message. So whether you are in the field of IT or whether you are doing a job in nanotech, doesn't matter. Try to produce the highest quality work, and also spend some time figuring out where the global trends are. And if you worked on highest quality output, and then your output is aligned with what the world is doing, then there's a good chance of you're doing the right thing. So yeah, the common thing across the board is always benchmark yourself with the best, and then at the beginning acquire enough knowledge, but then as you grow older, start benchmarking yourself with the best.
Okay, so talking a bit of you, what can you say about your time in USA when you were at MIT? What are unforgettable memories at MIT, and what did working at MIT give you?
I think the time in MIT was sort of a turning point in my career. I remember 2009 there was a conference in Boston. I had a research paper. We visited Boston, and then MIT Media had an open house. So I visited and I saw some of the really amazing stuff that I used to see on internet, on YouTube, were really in front of us. We could try them out. We could talk to some of these really famous star professors, and hear from them why they did what they did, and be inspired. And then soon after I came back, I wrote an email to one of the professors asking if she has any postdoc vacancies, and almost a few hours later she responded that there is a possibility for a visiting postdoc, and I grabbed that with both hands. So when I spent time in MIT, it was really a eye-opening experience in terms of the intellectual discussions you have. Just imagine you live in a place where if you come to the main street and walk to your left, about a mile that way you hit on Harvard. If you walk to the other side, you hit on Boston University. And pretty much everyone you bumped into are some unique individuals who happen to get there, and then you start admiring the wonderful achievements of these people. You start admiring their willingness to listen to you, and willingness to share things, and then you see the potential of doing stuff that set the trend for the entire world. And that type of stimulating culture, stimulating environment, if you stay there for a long enough period, then that's just going to change yourself, your career forever. And that's what happened to me. I was at the right place for an extended period of time, and that pretty much was a big turning point of my research and my career.
So after working at MIT, you came to Singapore as a professor and started Augmented Human Lab. So have any of your products become usable in everyday, like in the public?
Some of the things has gone beyond just a research project. I can maybe mention a couple of them. So one of them is early work that we did at MIT. Essentially, we were looking at why this moving digital data between devices, say a photo from your phone to someone else's phone. Why does it have to be always using a cloud service or service like Palm or email, all these things, which is not very trivial. I was going back to the example of not being able to figure out how to input characters to computer. So the point is, if it is a physical thing, you can just simply get it and pass it to someone. When it's a digital thing, you can't. So we designed a project called Sparsh, which essentially allows you to touch a digital content in your phone. Say it's a photo or it's a movie, and touch the other phone as if it's a real thing. It gets copied over, and Samsung took it. And if you're a Samsung user, say you have a Samsung smartwatch and a phone and a tablet, you can download this app called Samsung Flow. You can start browsing web page from your smartwatch, take it and drop it to your phone, and it starts from where you left. You can do something there, take it and drop it to your tablet. It gets copied. So that's one example of something we started in the lab. Now has become a service of one of the biggest consumer electronics company services. A second example would be Noctify. It's a simple wireless doorbell meant for people who can't hear. So what happens is, if someone knocks on your door, if you're not able to hear, if you're deaf, obviously you don't hear that. Even if you had a doorbell, you press the bell rings, you don't hear. So we designed a system, simple wireless doorbell system, that allows a deaf person to attach this doorbell by the door, and then there is a second part which is a light that lights up as well as vibrates. You can leave it anywhere you want, and when someone presses the button, you get light flashing as well as vibrating, so you get the alert. And the one of the differentiating factor of this is, even when you travel, sometimes your home is, you configure them to be accessible. When you travel, this Noctify device you can just carry on your pocket, and say you are in a hotel, you can attach the doorbell by the door and then have the light by your bedside, and when someone is knocking on the door, not just pressing the button, even knocking on the door, the doorbell detects that and then gets the message across to the light. That's called Noctify, and if you go to noctify.com, that's available as a product. One of my researchers now, he turned that into a tech startup and went through the whole design for manufacturing process. Now he's selling. He has sold a number of pieces in Singapore, right now in Singapore, but I have actually given some of them into some deaf schools in Sri Lanka. So that's a product that was started in the lab, now has gone through the entire product cycle. So that's not a service like the Sparsh. This is a real product which has a hardware component as well as a software component. Third one is a platform that we created in my tech startup in Sri Lanka. As I mentioned, one of the challenges I had when I moved to Singapore was the lack of ability of speaking or rather communicating confidently in English. In school we didn't think this as a really essential thing, but when I moved, I realized as much as you know your technical stuff, you have to be able to communicate effectively, confidently, to get your message across to a wide audience and get people follow you, believe you, and get them to really follow up on your work. So in Sri Lanka, I guess from my experience, the issue was one of them was the shyness of speaking, the fear of speaking, and then we always wait until we know all the theory to start speaking, which never happens. To address these things, we developed a service digital platform called Say Hello, which is essentially help you speak by speaking. That's, I mean, in my opinion, the only way you speak confident English or any other language is by speaking. And that's exactly why in any of these touristic areas, the local people speak multiple languages. Not necessarily because they went to school or they went to a tuition class that taught them that language. It's just because the exposure and learning by speaking. So this platform allows people to learn by speaking. Last year, around November, we released the first cut. So far, I think there's close to 40,000 downloads, and there are a number of pro users, and we release articles about tips and tricks about how do you become a confident speaker. I guess there are over 600-700,000 views on those articles. So that's another thing that spun out from one of my startups in Sri Lanka, and you can get more info if you visited www.sayhello.lk. That's the Say Hello platform. Then if you went to www.noctify.com, that's the smart sensor for deaf people. And then if you go to Samsung, it only works on Samsung devices, and look for Samsung Flow. That's a service which was using our early research project. Yeah.
Okay, so coming back to the education in Sri Lanka, what is your opinion about Sri Lankan government trying to send the highest scorers of advanced level examinations to the best universities in the world like MIT, Harvard, Cambridge and Oxford, but with a 10-year agreement to work for the country?
Oh, I didn't know that such thing exists, but if it does, or if there's a plan, that's great. But I guess the other important consideration would be assuming there's such initiative, assuming that you get the best 10 or 20 and send them to some of the best places like Harvard, Cambridge or MIT, whatever. The second piece, I guess the other critical part would be to think about, also assuming they come back, we probably have to think about the mechanisms or platforms to leverage their know-how and contributions. No point, sending your best to the best places and getting them to train and having that, probably the skill set that matches with the best in the world. And you ask them to come back and serve for 10 years, and then what do they do? What do you want them to do during those 10 years? So it has to have that follow-up mechanism set up as well. I guess if it is true, it's a great initiative, but that alone won't get what probably the objectives of the initiative. Maybe have to think about the other piece, which is creating that downstream platform that gets the best out of these people when they come back, and maybe wanting them to stay not just 10 but forever.
Okay, so related to Sri Lanka's education, we have one question from one of our audience members, Kavindya. So she's asking whether there is this one fix to the Sri Lankan education system, and like if you think there's one fix, what is that?
No, I don't think there's one fix. Let's say has to update itself. I guess as a long-term vision, or rather guiding principle, I would think the focus should be more of outside-in approach, which is we need to think of what the country or the world needs at large, what kind of school leavers, what kind of graduates, what kind of postgraduates, and then work our way backwards. How do we produce them? Work our way backwards and have that in the curriculum. That's one side of things. The other side is really the mindset of the people who are going through the education system, the students, school level, undergraduate level. The mindset should be about learning. Has to have the right learning attitude. As I mentioned earlier, their focus is about learning, broadening their knowledge, broadening their horizons, and nothing else. For other things, there are other forums, other groups of people can fight for other things, but at the school level, at the university level, the focus has to be primarily on expanding your knowledge. And then if the curriculum is sort of reworked more towards producing what the country wants, what the world wants, then then even this mismatch between the skill set and the opportunities will be minimized. So I don't see just one liner that says this is what you should do, but I think there needs to be some changes with these type of principles in mind.
Okay, so talking about your school days, you attended Royal College. So how did your time at Royal? Do you have any unforgettable memories at school?
I guess in Royal College, probably many of the people who attended the school would agree that has a great tradition, we had a great set of educators, teachers, and then wonderful network of people. Now, 20 years later, I can see my batchmates are in various places. You probably have a link to pretty much anywhere within Sri Lanka. So that's a great strength to have, a school with a lot of tradition, a lot of good teachers, resources, as well as a network of all boys. I think one of the unforgettable memories is one of my friends, a fellow student from my class, while we were waiting for advanced level results. This guy unfortunately had gone on a trip and drowned himself in sea, and he lost his life. And he was, for one subject, like in physics, he had a very high marks, almost one of the top students in the island, and all A's. So having spent a couple of years with him in the same class, almost next to him, and losing him, and seeing his parents, the experience their parents went through, and even now, when his parents see us now, they would try and imagine how he would have been if he had lived. So that's experience that always lives with me. The fact that we studied together, and the fact that he's no longer with us, and the fact that his parents are still looking at us as the evolved version of their loved son.
Okay, so then after school, you went to NUS for your undergraduate studies. So how was the life at NUS? What are the memories you have at NUS?
I guess any undergraduate, probably that's one of the best times of anyone's life, right? And the time in university, whether it's in US or elsewhere. For me, it was full of memories, full of experiences. First time out of Sri Lanka. I remember when I first left Sri Lanka to go to this place, I was so naive, long sleeves with a tie, so much extra weight, and carried pretty much everything from food to books to pens, and I was like self-sustained with my luggages and stuff. And then went to Singapore, suddenly realized that the culture-wise it's very different, the way the country operates was very different, the language was such a barrier at the beginning, and then as I proceeded through the system, I learned, I got adapted to the system. I had so many friends, and then had great times. We worked very hard because after all, you're out of the country and spending time without your family, and I wanted to make maximum out of it. So worked very hard, but at the same time used the freedom I had, responsibility to have fun and make friends and really create a network. So I guess the whole 4 years, not just 4 years, and in the end, the time in Singapore kept on going, and I went there to do my bachelor's degree, ended up doing a PhD, and then ended up coming back as a assistant professor, started lab, and I had my family started there. So eventually, altogether, I spent almost 18 years. So started from undergraduate years, NUS Singapore became essentially a big part of my life, and There are so many experiences that that that's coupled with that many years.
Okay, so were you always certain about your career path? I mean, did you have like a clear idea that you are going to be this researcher in HCI field?
HCI field, no, but I always wanted to be a professor. It was very clear from very young age, and that's why when I did my bachelor, when I did my advanced level, I sort of looked at what I needed to do to become that academic. So the first thing was to get a good bachelor's degree, ticked, and then the second thing was to get a good PhD. So I finished my bachelor's degree July 2005, and then August 2005 immediately started with PhD. And once that's done, I figured that the next thing would be to do a postdoctoral research at a very good place. So I was lucky enough, as I mentioned earlier, to have that in MIT, one of the best places. And once you check all this, and then I was at the right place at the right time when Singapore was creating their fourth public university, and they were looking for people who are young, as well as, especially this was done in collaboration with MIT, so somebody having gone through the Singapore system and then having MIT experience fitted very well. So it was very clear to me from the beginning that I needed to be academic, and I did the things that needed to be done to get there. HCI part, as you go along, I became interested in the area. Partly, again, as I said, the fact that I found it difficult to work with computers. I believed, and I still believe, that this is not because of my fault. It's because of the way the technology has been designed, and I wanted to change that. And the way to do that is think about new human-computer interfaces, which is essentially HCI. So I became a researcher and started contributing towards looking at new ways of creating man-machine interfaces that pretty much put the man in the background and man in the foreground, machine in the background, and hoping that these type of situations that I face, almost got myself intimidated by the technology, would never happen.
So, in your career, what are the challenges that you faced, and how did you overcome them, and what are the lessons learned from them?
Career, I guess, I did talk about a bit of my undergraduate years. Career, specifically focusing on the journey last 8 years as a university faculty member, as a professor, running my own research lab. There were many challenges, right? How do you sustain your lab? How do you get continuous stream of funding? How do you create industry relationships? How do you get good graduate students? How do you get good research engineers, good postdocs, and how do you produce good scientific output? All these are challenges that I had to face. I think one of the key thing that I think I did well, which is really proving to be very effective in the long run, is when I started the lab with one person. I was very clear that we need to have the right culture in the lab, and just with 2% we were on the same page. We got the third person, we created this very open-ended, very horizontal, very much extended family like culture in the lab. And as we grew, we kept that, and as of today, even with a lab of over close to 20 people, we still managed to keep that culture. And I think that's the biggest challenge I managed to tackle, and that's the most important challenge, I think, that helped to grow my professional career as a HCI researcher and a university professor.
Okay, so we have one question from our audience, Asita. What is the one thing that you believe which other people think is crazy?
Someone is trying to put me on the spot. I don't know the other people believing crazy part. That's hard to, that's hard to judge. But one thing I believe, which I think many people may not be, at least they may not be sustained to believe, would be, I believe pretty much everyone has a certain skill and success, and I believe in my gut feel that when I see somebody, I see their capability, and I'm patient enough to give them enough time to prove themselves, and that works. I don't see that's happening enough with many other people.
Okay. So, picking a favorite project must be like picking your favorite child. So, if I ask you to pick 3 of the most favorite projects, what would you pick?
Yeah, you're right. It's hard to pick a project. We have had over 40 projects last 8 years. Any project is as good as anything else. Just for the sake of answering the question, I'll pick 3. I'm picking Finger Reader, which is a project to help blind people because of the social impact aspect. I'll pick Bits, which is a little wearable that helps deaf kids make music, which has been deployed in Sri Lanka, and I've seen the impact that it has made. And then I also like the project Say Hello, which I could see myself benefiting a lot if I had that 20 years ago. So any other project is as good as this, but just these 3, I picked them just as a exemplary projects to answer your question.
Okay. So, what are the qualities you look in a person when you are recruiting people to your lab? And parallel to that, there's a question from our audience, from Tarika as well, that asking what would be the most prominent quality that is required from a researcher in the future. You can choose to answer them both.
So I guess most people applies to this place has certain level of skill set that's sort of given, and that's a very easy way of streaming the first batch, and then you get a number of people who are equally good with the technical abilities. I always look for the interpersonal, soft skills, and who they are as human beings. I'm looking for skilled people, but good people, and it's not one or the other. And when you get skilled people who are very good, that's really makes a place a unique place. And the way I figure out how good they are is basically, now over the years, as I said, I've developed a bit of gut feel. I always talk to people. I don't pick people or select people based on a CV. CV doesn't tell me much, but when I speak, I could always get a gut feel of that person's quality as a team player, as a human being, as a generally the value system of that person. So that's one thing, and then sometimes if there's an opportunity, that doesn't happen always, I get that person to mix with rest of the people in the group, because as I said, the group has a certain culture. If my students and researchers think that this person is a good person, chances of that person being a good person is very high, because it's not just one person, there are multiple eyes and ears evaluates and interacts and gives me feedback. And sometimes I just ask this question and if you happen to apply to this place, I would always ask, tell me why I need to get you as opposed to getting someone else. And people could prepare an answer, but you can very easily figure out who has a prepared answer and who has a genuine answer. and then that's a very easy way of selecting people, and that's how I would select, or rather how I would expect a person who will be joining this lab to be.
Okay. So, getting to HCI. So, what is HCI and how can someone get into HCI? And parallel to that, there are a lot of questions regarding HCI. What can you do to address the disabilities in the classroom, and can that be adapted in Sri Lanka? And that's from Hasini, and there's a question from Vikum asking whether there are any HCI projects that can be used to do as a collaborative project between Sri Lankan universities and here. And yeah, in terms of HCI, you can answer everything as a.
Okay, so those who probably hear the term HCI for the first time, that means human-computer interaction. Basically, it's a field that studies the interaction between the man and the machine, and there are a lot of theoretical aspects to this. How do you model a human? How do you model a computer? How do you model the interaction? How do you develop different interfaces? How do you evaluate if they are valid? There's lots of technicalities. One of the easiest point to get started is, because it has been there for many years, a simple search will get you lots of materials, and that's a great way of getting started. Or pick a book on basics of HCI. Alan Dix has almost a Bible of HCI. It's called HumanComputer Interaction by Alan Dix. That's a great book to get started. That's how you would probably do your first bit of reading on the topic. In terms of projects and what can you do for specific communities or specific things, one way would be, as I said, if you Google my lab, www.ahlab.org/projects, you will see number of things we have done, and we are not the only people doing HCI. There's a number of labs in the world. Germany, there's a strong HCI community. MIT Media Lab does lots of good work. Carnegie Mellon University, Stanford, you name it. Pretty much every university has a strong human-computer interaction department. So you could look for projects there and see what can be adapted, or whether they can inspire you to do your own project. The third piece of the question was, is there any specific project that we can do as a joint project between Sri Lanka and here? There is always, and we have been doing bits and pieces. One avenue I have is work with my startup in Sri Lanka and channel through projects through them. The other way is, there has been undergrads who were working on their final year project work, and I collaborated, and I remember at least in one or two situations we even had a joint paper published. Or it could be as simple as someone wants to do a project and want to get some help. If you wrote to us, in the lab we have myself and then several other Sri Lankan graduate students, and we would love to help if we see a potential impact. I mean, we don't want to do projects just for the sake of doing projects. We want to see a project having either a social impact or a commercial impact or a academic impact. And if we see that impact, I guess we'll be happy to jump on board and work together. And we firmly believe working together is probably one of the ways to create a more powerful or more impactful outcome. So if you think you have a really amazing project proposal or way that you want to work together with us, do write to us on our email address. And as I said, myself and several Sri Lankan postgraduate students, as well as there are other postgraduates who might be willing to help, depending on the project proposal. We could figure out what's the best mechanism to move forward.
Yeah. For the as per the Hasini's questions, uh, do you have any idea about addressing disabilities in classrooms, like related to Sri Lanka? Like it could be, I think, blind or deaf students in classrooms.
So we already did a pilot with blind group of blind people in vocational training setting using the finger reader that that basically allowed them to read printed documents. That's a one example, and those things can be extended. You need some local coordination, local support for that. My work on Moosebits, which is essentially a smartwatch like wearable that gives you vibration feedback on music, that allows a deaf person to play something and get the feedback and adjust what they do, just similar to how we play instrument. We play, we hear, we adjust. Similar to with this, they can play, they feel, they adjust. That was used in one of the deaf schools in Rawatawa, a private school, as a tool for their music training sessions. So those things could be expanded, and in fact, I had a chat with another deaf and blind school in Kandy. I'm actually going to send one of these pieces to them to try out, and hopefully maybe think of a collaborative jamming session between a hearing kid and a deaf kid playing two instruments and jamming together. Those are possible. Those can be adapted to other contexts as well, because as many people probably won't realize, blindness or deafness, for example, does have nothing to do with intellectual ability. So if you gave them the right tools to get information, they could be as good as anyone else. So I think there's a great potential. We have done bits and pieces on our own, but to really scale up in the local context, you do need collaboration support from people who operate in the local context.
Okay, so getting back to the PhD, how tough is a PhD, and is there any untold side of this PhD that people should know?
PhD is always tough, right? PhD is not, the difference is undergraduate, you are taught and you learn. As I said, your focus should be just learning. A master's, again, you have specific directions set, and then you just expand you broaden your knowledge from undergraduate level. But PhD, at the beginning you get some guidance which direction to go, but what is expected from a PhD is adding knowledge to what's known. So you really have to dig deep and start investigating things, and outcome should be addition to the knowledge. So let's say the world knows so much, and after your PhD the world should know so much plus bit from your own work, and once you're done with your PhD, you are the expert in that particular topic more than your advisor, even your advisor. So it's very hard work, because nobody could lay the entire path for you. If somebody did, then that's not a PhD. Then you are just told to what to do. Then you will be just implementing stuff that someone else wants you to do. But if you do a real investigation of knowledge, after some point you take the input from your advisors and go to places that even your advisor has not been to, and create knowledge. So it's a very tough going. Things won't go according to plan always. So you need to be having that courage, that gas, that discipline to try things over and over again. Not just a day, a week, a month, a year, maybe 3 years, maybe 5 years. So that needs a lot of determination and a lot of passion. So, and the other part is, I don't know whether how many people do this calculation, assuming you live 100 years, which is only few people do. Even if you happen to live 100 years, doing a 5-year PhD is 5% of your life, right? So you need to really ask yourself, am I doing something that's worth 5% of my life? So you better be super passionate about what you do, and if so, then spend a lot of time and get the best output and outcome, because after all it's a significant portion of your life which you could have done something else. So yeah, so it's not easy, but once you get it, it's probably a lot of satisfaction if you went through the right path.
I think we are getting a lot of questions about HCI. So I think to answer them all, can you clarify that how these all the technologies, we can say AR, VR, mixed realities, deep learning, machine learning, and all these technologies and the relationship between those technologies and HCI?
So as I said, HCI is the studying the interaction between human and computer. So it's a field that benefits or interacts with lots of other fields. So to develop new man-machine interfaces, you need techniques like machine learning. You need to play with the input-output. You need things like augmented reality, the VR headsets or augmented reality headsets, or you will need new knowledge on new sensors. That's the input part. Output part, maybe it's the audio, it's visual overlaying part, things like conversational agents, and then to study you need the physiological or psychological aspect, the behavioral science. So it's a collection of knowledge that comes from other core fields, where the focus on HCI is, one side is create novel input output. Basically, how do you input things to your computation mechanism, not just a computer, right? Anything that has a computation power, how do you provide the instructions? Typical would be the keyboard and mouse, but there are many other ways. So looking at that, what are the different possibilities, building them, testing them if they are valid, looking at output, how do you get the information out? It's not just the screen, right? There are many modalities, looking at what are the effective ways of representing this output. Then also looking at the effect of these things on people, on users. There's number of tools and techniques we borrow from other fields. So the things that you mentioned, those are specific techniques, specific tools that useful in some scenarios. HCI as a broader field is really looking at understanding the input output between the man and the machine, and the society at large. So it evolves, or rather it leverages the techniques developed by engineering, psychology, computer science, using them to study this specific phenomena.
Okay, so as a one last question, getting back to you, so we have two questions from Sahan and Menuku also. So like now, do you have any goals that are yet to be achieved, and what is your ultimate objective?
I think everybody should have a bigger plan. For me, right now my focus has been, I've sort of achieved the basic academic output and developed a certain reputation in the HCI community, developed a lab and sustain a lab and gotten funding. I guess the next level would be to really make a significant impact, and I see this significant impact in two directions. One of them is turning some of these projects that I have into huge success that brings commercial sustainability, not just making money, but rather creating jobs, creating opportunities, and partnering with industry. That's one side of impact I want to do. The second, probably the most closest to my heart, will be the societal impact. So I would love to see some of these things like finger reader, mouse bits, or other interfaces being used by people with disabilities, and probably these interfaces would act as the bridge between bringing the different communities together, and platforms like Say Hello creating opportunities for young people to really unleash their full potential. So my next goal, or rather next thing, would be to not just work on a single project with just a tiny little output or a paper that we can publish, but rather looking at creating a big societal impact in terms of either economical success or just changing the lives of people. And right now I'm doing things that hopefully get the outcome that I'm looking for in the years to come.
Okay, so to end our session, I will ask you some quick questions about something like about your personal life. So I'll be asking some quick questions and you can just give short answers.
Okay.
Okay. So what is your favorite country?
Singapore.
Favorite city?
Auckland.
Favorite song?
Depends on the time and the mood.
Favorite singer?
Same, depends on the time and the mood.
Favorite food?
Favorite food? Mutton, lamb chops.
Favorite drink?
Tea.
Favorite movie?
21.
A place you would go to relax?
Home.
What is your motto in life?
Give everyone a chance and they'll almost always impress you.
What is the best innovation in the world in your opinion?
Electricity.
What is your favorite book?
Last lecture.
Last book that you have read?
Show and tell.
What is your hobby?
YouTube movies.
If you can become anyone right now, who would you like to become?
I think I'm happy with who I am.
What is your favorite quality about yourself?
Openness.
Who is your role model?
Professor Patty Mills.
Secret skills that you have which we don't know.
I can cook very well.
Biggest risk you have ever taken in your life?
Moving my entire life from Singapore to Auckland, including my family.
Who would have been Suranga Nanayakkara if he was not leading the Augmented Human Lab?
Maybe a person leading a social innovation company.
Okay, so those are the questions for today's interview, and thank you for joining us today with this live interview. Okay, thank you our audience also for joining us and asking questions and engaging with this interview.
Thanks. I hope the session was useful, and for any follow-up, I'm happy to be contacted through my email, and the details are in my the research lab web page.